Welcome to 7.RP.3, goal number 2, part A. So in this particular set of goals, you will have 3 parts to them. You have 2 videos in the first part, part A. You have 2 videos in the second part, part B. And you have 1 video for the third part. So this is video number 1. And throughout all of these videos, you will be focusing on this standard, use proportions to solve multi-step percent problems. So to begin, let's talk about the word percent. Percent, in all reality, if we were to break this down, per means of, and cent means 100. We can think of cent being century, cent as in cents in your pocket, that sort of thing. And that all is based on the number 100. So in all reality, the percent is a number out of 100. And I want you to be very, very conscious of this concept of out of 100. This whole idea of a number out of 100 will be a theme for your life through this set of problems. So a percent is the part, or is a part to whole ratio that compares a number to 100. So quite literally, it is a ratio that compares a number to the number 100. So that is how we're breaking this down. If we look at the number 80%, we could also rewrite this as saying 80 out of 100, which could also be written as 80 over 100. We could also then simplify that 80 over 100 and say 8 over 10 and then 4 over 5. So as a simplest form fraction, it's 4 over 5, and that is 80%. So let's go on and let's think of this sort of concept, this number out of 100. We need to write each percent as a fraction in simplest form. So if 60% is a number out of 100, we could rewrite as 60 as saying 60 over 100. And then from there, simplifying, because we need to find simplest form. So to simplify, we could divide the top by 10 and the bottom by 10. So we would then get 6 over 10, and then from there we can also see these are both even numbers, so we could divide the top by 2 and the bottom by 2, and we will get 3 over 5. So 60% as a fraction in simplest form is 3/5. So let's go on and do 40, and we'll make it nice and simple. So we have 40%, that is 40 over 100, 40 out of 100. We can then do the same thing, divide by 10 on the top and the bottom. So we divide by 10, divide by 10, and if we were to do that, we end up with 4 over 10, which equals 2/5, simplest form. 40% is 2/5 as a fraction in simplest form. Now we're going to get a little bit more complicated here. We have these problems. We have 12.5% and 20 3/4%. So if we're looking at 12.5%, let's put that as a number over 100, so we can write 12.5 as 12.5 over 100. Now, when we actually have a situation where we have a decimal within a fraction, that tells us that it's already too simplified. It's gone beyond where its simplest form is, or it's gone beyond its simplest form in a really strange way. So if we go back and we look at 12.5 and we look at the denominator here for this 2 or of a half, it's a 2. So if we were to multiply the top number by 2 and the bottom number by 2, whatever we do to the top, we do to the bottom, we can actually take this beyond its previous simplification. So 12.5 times 2 is actually 25, and 100 times 2 is 200. And then from there, we can actually probably simplify. I notice that we have a 5 and a 0 as our ending numbers, so that means that this top number can be divided by 5, and the bottom number can be divided by 5. So 25 divided by 5 is 5, and 200 divided by 5 is 40. And then from there, we can also see, we got a 5 and a 0 again, so that means we can divide by 5 again on the top and the bottom, and we get 1 over 8. So 12.5% written as fraction is 1/8. We're going to try one more problem, and we're going to use the same sort of concept of playing around with this denominator multiplying by the denominator again. So this time we have, I'm going to erase that and not do white there. I'm going to do orange. So we have 20 3/4%, which is essentially 20.75 over 100, a number out of 100. So we have 20.75 over 100, and so we have also this 4 as our denominator, so we can see that, oh, we got a decimal in our numerator. Things have become a little funky with simplification. It's gone too far. So we can say 20.75 times 4, our denominator number, and then 100 times 4, our denominator number, is where we're going to go with that. And if we do the math there, we'd end up getting 83 over 400. And if we were to actually do the math there, there's actually no common factors, so 83 over 100 is simplest form. So that is one way that we can play around with this. This is writing percent as a fraction in simplest form. So now we need to also be able to do the following. We need to be able to write a percent as a fraction in simplest form with other sort of percents. In this case, we have 0.8% and 175%. So based on our same concept of a percent being a number out of 100, we can say 0.8 out of 100 is our equivalent fraction. However, we can also see that there is a decimal there, and that decimal is not going to work out for us. So 8/10 is what we can say here. We have 0.8, which is also 8/10. So there is our new denominator. We can multiply this top part by 10 and the bottom part by 10, and we end up getting 8 over 1,000. From there, we could then also simplify this. And if we were to simplify this, we could divide the top by 8 and the bottom by 8, and we'll end up getting 1 over 125. So our equivalent fraction is 1 over 125. Now, if you didn't see that we could divide the top and the bottom by 8, you could definitely divide the top and the bottom by 2. You'd get 4 over 500, both even numbers, so that means we could divide by 2 again. We get 2 over 250, still even numbers, so we could divide by 2 again, and we get 1 over 125. Alright, so now let's move on to this 175. 175 as well is a number out of 100, so we can write 175 over 100. Now if we were to simplify this as a fraction, we can see already that it's an improper fraction, so we know that we can take one whole piece out because 100 can add or go into 75 one time, and then what's remaining is 75 over 100. And if we thought about our math, 75 over 100, we can divide the top by 25 and the bottom by 25. We do to the top, we do to the bottom, and we end up getting 1 3/4. So that is our simplified version of that. We could also just keep it as an improper fraction and write 7 over 4. That is also equivalent. Those are equal. So now let's move on from here. So we also need to be able to write fractions as percents. And in order to do that, we need to essentially be able to move this denominator and multiply it high enough to be able to get 100 as a denominator. So if we are looking at 1/4, can we make 4 turn into 100? Well, yeah, we can. We can multiply it by 25 and we get 100 on the denominator. So what we do to the bottom, we do to the top. So we get 1 times 25, which is 25. So that means 25 out of 100 is 25%. 1/4 is 25%. Now you're probably like, Ms. Beardsley, that's so easy. Of course I know that. Well, you guys are amazing. That's why. So now we have 3 over 10. And if we were looking at 3 over 10, we could say, well, I can make 10 into 100 by multiplying by 10. And if I do that on the bottom, I need to do that on the top. So we end up with 30 over 100. And 30 over 100 is another way of saying 30 out of 100, which is 30%. Final answer for 3/10. Let's now do 6/5. How do I turn a 5 into 100? Well, let's say we can at least do times 10, and that gets us to 50. And so we're going to do a couple of steps. We have 60 over 50, and then I know 50 goes into 100 2 times, so I can multiply the top and the bottom by 2. So I have 120 over 100. So 120 out of 100 is 120%. Final answer for that one. Now let's look at 7 over 2. 2 goes into 100 at least 25 times, we could say. It goes into 100 at least 25 times, and if we did that, we have 25, or 2 times 25, which is 50, and 7 times 25, which is 175. And then if we were to multiply by 2, so we could get the 50 to turn into 100, we could do that, and we get 350 on the top over 100, which is 350%. Awesome. So now you know how to turn a percent into a fraction in simplest form by essentially putting that percent over 100 and simplifying. And now you also know how to do that with really small percents and really big percents, and you know how to turn a fraction into a percent as well. So now I would like you to start on the problems for Part A, Video 1. So it's the problems that are on page 334. And if you have any questions, as always, please ask. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you later.